So will you all do me a favor and be present with me for the next half an hour? Will you put your phones in your pocket or in your purse? Will you put your packets down? And just be present. If you're sitting by yourself, would you please join another group, make some new friends? Because we're going to have some conversations among each other. So now's the time to get up and move and sit closer to someone else so you can have a conversation if you're not currently next to someone. I would really appreciate your attention. I'm usually the worst offender with the phones too, so I'm practicing what I have a hard time, preaching what I have a hard time practicing, but thank you for being willing to be here with me. Thank you. As you can tell by the ice and the 2-hour drive this morning, there's not a whole lot that I wouldn't do for Food for Lane County, provided it's on this side of legal. I will be here to support Food for Lane County and the work that you do, because I think you guys are amazing. And furthermore, I tell the rest of the country that you're amazing on a regular basis. We're here to talk this morning about why we do the work we do, and I think it's really appropriate that we're in a sanctuary to do that, because it really comes down to our deepest core values and beliefs, doesn't it? So we're going to have some, what I hope is stirring conversation, and my goal is that you'll leave from here today and you'll go, I remember that part. So Joey, would you just real quickly want to remind you the network into which you belong? This is the Oregon Food Bank Network. There are 21 regional food banks, which includes Clark County, Washington. No other state in the country, and probably no other region in the world, operates as well as Oregon, operates as deeply networked, as deeply supported. The regional food banks get together quarterly, and the regional food banks make decisions together about how we're going to equitably share food and funds across the state. And it just fills me with such pride to stand up here in front of you and remind you all that this is what we belong to. And then let's talk about what we do. So 800,000 Oregonians are receiving emergency food assistance each year. That's an estimate. We know how many food boxes we give out, and it's a little bit harder to get the exact number, but that's huge, isn't it? Huge? That's a staggering 1 in 5. And we know that among kids, 1 out of every 2 school-age kids gets a free or reduced lunch. So we are working upstream. The work we do is hard. We watch good people struggle. We watch children raised without all they need. And we watch people who worked hard all their lives barely get by in their final years. Let me share a couple stories of folks that we have met during the years. This is Mary. She takes care of her grandkids all the time, and she says, when my grandkids come over, there's no such thing as grandma doesn't have any food. I come to the food pantry and I have to improvise. I thank God I'm a good cook. And this is Carissa. Carissa has an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and twin 6-year-olds, and they all have special needs. She has to go to the food bank to get food, and a lot of her fresh food and produce comes from the food bank. These are the people that we're serving. So that leads us to the question of why? Why do we do what we do? Well, here are the ones that occurred to me. We do it because of our personal experiences, and let me tell you a story that was my foundational moment. I was 13, and I was standing on a stage like this for a dress rehearsal, and my character was the deadly sin of pride, and I'm standing there in costume, chatting with the assistant director of the play, and she was a college student, and she came from a low-income background, and she had a scholarship to help her pay for tuition. But in order to get food, she was going through dumpsters to find soda cans and beer cans that she could redeem for 10 cents. And that's the money that she was using for food. And at 13, I'd never met anyone who was in such a bad place that going through dumpsters felt like the best solution to their needs. And I remember crying. I was standing on stage in my costume. I was crying and crying. My mom came to pick me up. She calmed me down. She said, "Honey, I'm so glad this upsets you. What are you going to do about it?" That's my mom for you. Never let you get away with, just feeling something. But that was a personal experience for me that kicked off this. And I'd be willing to bet that most of you in this room have some seminal moment that got you engaged in this work. We do this work because of our beliefs. I was raised Quaker, and one of the core Quaker beliefs is that God is not up there somewhere, but rather God is a spark in each and every person. And if you believe that God is a spark in each and every person, and you see someone who's struggling, how can the God in you not respond to the God in them? Because of empathy, because we can imagine what it would be like, there but for the grace of God. One of my staff members told a story of remembering from one of her various early memories of being about 3, her mom had given her a bowl of oatmeal, and she didn't want it, and being a 3-year-old, she threw it across the room, and her mom broke down crying. And she didn't remember or learn until several decades later that her mom broke down crying because it was the only food in the house, was that bowl of oatmeal. And I heard that story, and at that time I had a 3-year-old, and I just thought, oh, I can't even imagine being in that place. And because we want to be part of creating a bigger world. So it's about personally our experiences and our beliefs and our ability to have compassion, but it's also a vision. It's a vision for the kind of society we want to live in. It's a vision for the kind of people we want to be. So I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor and tell them the story of why you do this work. Take a couple minutes, please. Are you guys learning something new? Have you heard a story you haven't heard before? An approach that hadn't occurred to you? Anybody have a story they're willing to share? I can outwait you. Yeah. You don't have to come up.
I was very blessed when I got homeless. I got sick and I got homeless with my 10-year-old at the time at Church of Nazarene in Cresswell. And one of the conditions where I had to volunteer at the church, and that's where I started back in 97, 98, somewhere.
Thank you.
There since. Off and on. That's my attitude, so.
So for those of you who couldn't hear, she found herself homeless at the Church of the Nazarene in Creswell, and she started volunteering there at that time. Got back on her feet, but the volunteering has continued to be part of her life. So thank you very much for sharing that story. Great story of personal experience. Thank you. Was there another brave soul who would be willing to share their story?
lived out in the desert and I didn't have a job and no money, so I used to go over to the neighbor's house and take eggs to eat.
Take eggs from the neighbors?
Because I figured they wouldn't notice those were missing.
And so now karmically you're giving back to be... I think you need to drive a truckload of eggs to your former neighbors, don't you think, to just sort of balance it all out? Thank you. Thank you both for sharing. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of how we do our work. I'm almost 2 decades now in or around food banking. I turn 45 tomorrow, by the way. Yay, 45. This is Alicia, who told me this morning that I look like Britney Spears because of this thing. To which my response was, that's the first and last time anyone will ever say that to me. After 2 decades in food banking, one of the things that's become clear to me is that giving food to people facing hunger is good work. It is good, important work. But giving food to people facing hunger well can be transformative. So what I want to talk about next is what does well look like? And I want to tell you it through 2 stories. The story of Henry and the story of Howard. And both of these gentlemen ran food pantries in church basements. And I'm not talking church like this. I'm talking 100-year-old church with the narrow little concrete stairs that go down in the basement that the water still leaks in. Yeah? You guys, you resemble that remark, huh? Yeah, 2 little tiny rooms that you had to maneuver around. Everything had to be hand carried down into the church basements. Henry, when you walked into Henry's food pantry, it went sort of like this. Henry would say, "You haven't been here before, have you?" "No." "Okay, well, I need to see your driver's license and I need to see proof that you need this food." And you'd pull out your folder of documentation that you carry around to all the offices, and then he would look through it. And he would say, "Well, I'm going to call Salvation Army and make sure you haven't gotten any food from them this month." You pick up the phone and call. And then when he had done vetting you, oh, and by the way, you were the only one standing inside. The rest of the line was up the stairs outside. He would say, "Okay, we'll get you a box." And a volunteer would go into the back room, pull out a box size based on the family. And he'd say, "Behind you, there's some bread. You can choose 2 things of bread." And you would leave with that box of food. And that was your experience when you went to Henry's food pantry. And then there's the experience of going to Howard's food pantry. Remember, they look more or less identical physically. You walk into Howard's food pantry, and you're walking into a space in which he has put up colorful posters, and he's got a whole mess of ratty chairs for people to sit on, and he walks in, and someone rushes over to you right away and says, "Have you been here before? I don't recognize your face. My name is Mary. What's your name? Oh, well, let me show you how this works. You sit down here, we'll get you checked in. And while you're sitting, why don't you think about what else we can do for you in terms of food? We got a clothing pantry down the block in somebody's garage, and we can personally drive you down to the SNAP office if you haven't signed up for that. And think about how else we might be able to help you while you're here." And you wait in a comfortable chair for a little bit, and then you'd go up, and they'd ask you some questions about how big your family is, but they'd also say, "And how are you doing? Oh, and can you tell me when your birthday is? Because we like to make sure we give birthday cards to our folks who come here. And is there anything else we can do for you?" And then when it was your turn to go get food, you would go with a volunteer into that back little room, and they would walk you around and say, "Would you like some melons? Would you like some bread? Can you use tomatoes? What works for you? Oh, you don't need that? Okay, let's not take that. Let's see what works for you." That's the experience of going to Howard's food pantry versus going to Henry's food pantry. Does this ring true to you guys? Have you been to a Howard food pantry and a Henry food pantry in your lives? Yeah? No? So one of the sort of defining moments in my life was thinking about Henry and Howard, both of whom are in their 70s, and thinking, why isn't Howard Henry? You know, Why isn't Howard's been doing this for 20 years, just like Henry has. Henry has clearly gotten himself into the place of, people need to prove to me they need this food. Why isn't Howard Henry? So that's my question to you guys. What do you think? Why is it easy to become a Henry? What? Frustration. Fear. Control. Burnout. Lack of compassion. Lack of help.
Maybe he doesn't understand the need. Maybe he's never been homeless, or maybe he's never been hungry himself. You know what I'm saying?
For me, I think it ultimately comes down to the story we tell ourselves, right? The way we're going to choose to view the world. The way we construct that we view other people and the people inside that worldview. So I want to tell you another story, and this is the story of Sophia, and this is a client at a food pantry. You pretend you're a volunteer, which I think is probably easy for most of you, at a food pantry, and Sophia comes in, and she's dressed in a business suit. She's well made up. Her hair is done. She's got on nice jewelry. She came up driving up in a nice car. Another volunteer whispers to you that she thinks that she lives in that part of town where the rich people live. And Sophia comes in and asks for food. Well, this is what you know about Sophia. Given all this that you know about Sophia, how do you think of Sophia in your mind? Just take a moment quietly to yourselves and say, which of these adjectives do you find yourself applying to Sophia? Questionable. Suspicious? Dishonest. So then let me tell you what happened before Sophia left the house that morning. Sophia lives in the basement, is borrowing the basement from a friend who lives in that nice part of town because her husband lost their job and they lost their house. And so they've moved in with a friend in the nice part of town. And saying to the friend, I know, I got to take care of my family. I got to go to the food pantry, but I hate going there. I hate having to ask for help, and I don't have anything to wear, and I hate having to take 3 buses to get there. And the friend says, why don't you go into my closet and pick something out, and here are the keys to my car. Now you know that about Sophia. Which of these adjectives apply to her? Sincere. Truthful. Trustworthy. Credible. If you don't remember a single other thing than what I've said to you this morning, this is the most important thing I came down here from Portland to say to you is, we don't know someone else's story by looking at them. You never know someone else's story by looking at them. And though I know the good book says, judge not lest you be judged, I can personally tell you I have never managed to do that. It is too hard to not judge folks. So what I try and do is change the story I tell myself. So when I run into a Sophia, I try and say, what is the story behind this behavior that would make me have compassion for them? What is the story behind this behavior that would make me think that they were somebody who was worthy of my help? And if you can have a chance, you can actually ask them. And in my lifetime of doing this, I've met one person who was not trustworthy, and she is unfortunately my stepmother-in-law. But the vast majority of folks, incredible, overwhelming majority of folks, have a story with which you will resonate. Yeah, they've probably made some bad choices, but I'm sorry, I've made bad choices, Anybody in this room not made some bad choices? Because you don't come up and preach? But almost always there's something about the story that will bring out the compassion in you. So how do you change the story you tell yourself so that you can be a Howard and not a Henry? How can you be thinking about changing that story? Through the years, we've learned something about the best practices that Howard and the many, many Howards, and I'm sure many of you guys are working in Howard-like food pantries, but there are things in common. And the first one was something that Jesus would have said, also Gandhi and Martin Luther King and many of the most worthy people that we have ever heard of, and that's leading with love. So starting with that story that allows you to respond with love to whoever you're working with. Treating people as individuals, getting to know their names, getting to know their stories, tailoring what the kind of food they need, helping them if they've got a physical disability, helping them if they've got a mental disability, helping them if they need help that day. Giving people choices. I cannot think of a single thing more destroying to the soul than poverty. And that sense that all of your world has narrowed to what is remotely possible and all the things that are impossible. The more that we can give folks who are struggling to feed themselves and their family choices, we are expanding souls. Providing extra help. So, can I help you with SNAP? Can I get you a food, the clothing store? Do you need a bus pass? What are the wraparound services? Maybe your food pantry can't afford to do them all. None of us can afford to do everything. But you can make those connections. You can think about what else it is they might need. I heard a story from a food pantry coordinator just the other day of a client who came in and got a bag of food and then came in the next day and asked for more food. And she's like, really? You ate all that? And she's like, oh, I couldn't open it. I don't have a can opener. So food pantry coordinator went out and bought a can opener for her. What are the little things that made the difference? Celebrate. The birthday card touch has stayed with me from Howard's piece forever, because just that little thing of we care enough about you to think about how to celebrate with you is huge. And each great food pantry I've been to has had some way to do those celebrations. There are also some back-end best practices. So those are ones thinking about how you deal with the clients, but on the back end, building a community, the community of volunteers who are working there. And in the best world, there's not much separation between the volunteers and the folks who are asking for food assistance, right? Because on some days we need help, and on some days we give help. Praying or thinking together. If you're a faith-based food pantry or soup kitchen or agency, you have an easy way to do this, because a prayer circle is a great way to ground everybody in why it is you do what you do. If you're not faith-based, then you have to get a little bit more creative in thinking about how are you engaging people's emotions? How are you engaging people's brains in this work? How are you stopping to reflect on why this work is important? And I have seen food pantries after the shift is done and the line is over, stop and go, anybody hear a good story today? Anybody meet someone new today? Just take 2 minutes, pull everybody together in a circle and say, let's reconnect on the why we've done this. And then there's the develop shared values. I personally think that it is incredibly important to lay out there in front of everybody what it is that you believe and why it is that you're doing what you're doing, and then to remind yourselves regularly. We've done it at Oregon Food Bank. I've got a couple I want to share with you that we refer to. Joey, if you would, there we go. We believe no one should be hungry. I think this one should be obvious, but it goes back to the story of Sophia, right? And no one should be hungry, no matter what life has thrown at you, no matter what choices you've made. You don't deserve this. We care deeply about people experiencing hunger and hold them in the center of all we do. That sounds obvious, but it's actually really, really hard, because our egos get in the way, and our budgets get in the way, and our quest for efficient processes get in the way of holding the people who are experiencing hunger at the center of all we do. So we touch that one regularly and go, okay, we just made this decision. Does this decision hold the people we're trying to serve in the center of all we do? Simple question. We believe that people seek food assistance when they need it and give back when they can. We've all met folks who weren't the easiest folks to love in the food assistance world. And I think what happened to Henry over those years was he got fixated on those folks. And his job was to stop them from working the system or defrauding the system. And we just decided as an organization we were going to put our stake in the sand, and we were going to say, no, we're Howard. We believe people seek food assistance when they need it. That's why people are coming, because they need it. And we believe, like this lady here, that when they can, they give back. I want to close with a little word from Ken. He says at the food pantry, it's not the food that's the blessing. You get the food, but you also get the community together, and that's the most important thing. To see the love that comes out of there, it broke me down in tears. Thank you guys so much for letting me be with you today.